Hey guys, I'm Davey, creator of the gay erotic website Himeros.tv, and today I am joined by sex and intimacy coach Finn Deerhart and sexologist and podcast host from Sex with Dr. Jess O'Reilly, and today we are talking about just skipping the kiss. Himeros Backstage is supported by Himeros.tv. Himeros.tv is a different kind of porn site. Our videos are hot, but also grounded in better sex and authenticity. Plus, they'll give you the tools that you need to increase pleasure and connection, in addition to getting you off. Himeros Backstage listeners can save 20% off any membership just by going to himeros.tv/pod. That's HIMEROS.tv/pod. Himeros.tv is like porn, but better. Welcome, Dr. Jess.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so fun to have you here. So you are a best-selling author, podcast host, sexologist, but also you live in the best city in the world, as far as I understand, Toronto.
Oh, so what do you love about Toronto?
Well, I love a lot of things about Toronto. St. Lawrence Market. I love the all-you-can-eat sushi, the lovely people, the foreskin, some of the best foreskin in the world in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that's what we're known for, right?
Yeah.
Sushi, foreskin, and I don't know, healthcare. I live just a short walk to the St. Lawrence Market.
Ah, that's such an awesome area. Yeah. And I want to clarify, I don't think it's so much the foreskin itself, but maybe what the foreskin is attached to, which are Canadian men, which I tend to enjoy, and hockey butts, which are also abundant in Toronto.
What's a hockey butt look like? Like,
You've checked out, you've not seen the hockey butts.
Yeah,
it's like a butt that can like skate all day long.
Yeah, because you have so many skaters there, so it's like the really like round, like thick thighs, thick butt.
That's my partner. So he's actually. I wish, you know what, if I can get him in here, I'll ask him to show the hockey butt, but he played hockey.
No,
and still plays.
Don't, because we're going to talk. We're going to be talking about him shortly because he gets me a little hot. So please don't bring him in because I will turn bright red and not be able to conduct this podcast. He's very handsome,
and
your partner.
You'll kick me off. Everybody wants Brandon more than me. And honestly, I get it. I brought him on to co-host my podcast, and now everyone's just asking for Brandon.
I think it's so cool that y'all work together in podcasting and stuff, because I just appreciate hearing it's like inside scoop and outside scoop, you know. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think he brings a really cool perspective, and that's the only area we work in together. It's like that one half-hour session a week, and then we do our own thing, so it works out. It's not like, 40, 50 hours a week.
But like, he's obviously physically sexy, but how sexy is it that he's also like supporting the work that you're doing? Like, that's so cool. I love that. Makes him even hotter.
The degree, honestly, I just got off a call earlier this morning with my therapist, and I was just saying, like, the degree to which this person supports me, if everybody had this support, I just feel like life is so much easier. And I see a lot of relationships, right? Almost when I talk about it, I'm like, it almost sounds like it's not true. It's just too good. He's amazing, honestly. Like, his butt is amazing, but his butt is the bomb, but he is the bomb, honestly.
That's awesome.
The cherry on top. How long have you lived in Toronto?
My whole life. I'm born and raised here.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and this is such a nice time to be in Toronto. I've spent a lot of summers there, and it's like, I think because your summers are so short, everyone wants to like squeeze like the most that they can out of them. So people plant these like incredible flower gardens, and because it's like 12 weeks long, and then you have like, like 9 months of winter.
It's so heartbreaking. Yeah, it's like as soon as Labor Day hits, they're like, we're done. Although we're getting a little bit of a stretch summer right now. So even though it's nice for us, it's probably not good for the earth, for the planet.
Yeah, as global warming continues, Toronto's going to become like, it'll be like the new California.
Jamaica, pretty much.
Yeah. So as much as I would like to talk about Toronto for the entire podcast, we're supposed to talk about sex. And we have a little icebreaker question. We've been doing this each week, kind of as a round robin. So the question today is, what is one major challenge that you have faced sexually, and how did you handle it? So, Finn, do you want to start with that?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Wow. Okay, so I'll reveal stuff about this. Like, so I have a real dominant streak in me, And it's been really hard for me to step into that because I have been so socialized and conditioned. Well, one, I've also had like a abusive childhood, but that's part of it. But also just like I'm a smaller man. And so really stepping into that in a sexual culture where size is the differential like decider of like who gets to be the dominant one typically has been really hard. And I've been inspired by watching like trans men with a vagina, like, you know, dominating somebody and being like, look at that. Like, I don't have to have this massive cock or this big body to be dominant. I just have to tap into it. So I've done a lot of like mirror play and like jacked off in the mirror and like looked for qualities in myself that like equate with like size or strength, and just really try to feel what that feels like in my body and then bring that to the sex. And it comes and goes. Sometimes I'm really like in it, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll just be subby.
Yeah.
It's powerful there.
Yeah, it is a trope though. I feel like we haven't really stepped outside of that trope much, even with Himeros videos, that it still is kind of like we're playing. It's almost like a heteronormative structure of like, you know, like the dude, right, in the pairing is like the one who's gonna be stepping into the dominant role. We really should play more with some of the kind of subversive elements there.
And let's be clear, it's fun. The dude is fun sometimes, but he's not the only one.
Right.
Like, I really love watching women be dominant with men, too. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, fuck him. Get that. make him settle down.
Totally, yeah. I hooked up with a guy fairly recently that was like 6'4" and like a lot bigger than me, and he wanted me to just like use his dick. So I just like tied him up to my bed and like it was so fun, and it's not a role that I get to like step into a lot, but hey, future Himeros video.
There you go.
Dr. Jess, what's one challenge that you have faced sexually, and how have you handled it?
I think for me, it's just staying interested in sex when I'm kind of talking about it, studying it, engaging with it all day long. And I think that I sometimes just kind of struggle to transition from work mode to personal mode, right? And you know, you can be doing something, enjoying it, and then you're thinking, oh, this would be a good thing to teach. And so just kind of staying in the moment. And it kind of goes back to a lot of what you're saying, Finn, which sort of sounds like grounding and mindfulness, and having rituals that like work is done, kind of changing my clothes or putting the phone in a certain place. For me, it's just like that boring, practical transition from work that is still in sex to sex that is just for me and maybe my partner if I'm feeling generous. That dominance thing is so interesting to me though, because I think I used to be so much more dominant. And then when I started working in the field and had to manage and weigh in on and hear from and support and almost orchestrate so many other people's sex lives, it made me so much more submissive, where I'm like, you know what, I don't really want to take control. I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to perform. I don't want to be good. I just want someone else to just call the shots and take care of me. And I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to make any decisions. So I wonder like how working in the field switches our DS roles. And I hear from other people in the field who feel similarly. We're just like, no, man, we've taken care of enough things. We're not taking care of this.
Totally.
I actually, a lot of the people in my life who are kind of more like higher up, like the CEO types, like people who have a lot of responsibilities when it comes to sex, they want to be, you know, nothing. Like just, I want to check out, like use me, play with me, do whatever. So maybe it's like that dominant role is being exercised, you know, in your work life, and like it's wanting to be balanced out sexually.
Yeah, like just wanting to make no more decisions at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like, you know, here's the... Oh, go ahead.
No, just I don't want to decide like where we do it, how we do it, how long we do it, where, like what it's like. Just I love that language of use me, because that's something really hot for me.
Mm-hmm. I was curious too, Dr. Jess, that, you know, like, so being prolific in the field too, and it's like, you know, like you said, orchestrating the sex lives for people. Do you feel any kind of difficulty sometimes, like whenever your own like inner child stuff comes up, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to have the answers here, but I actually don't, or like I need just like kind of, you know, accessing your own wisdom, but feeling like, well, I'm just not the expert in this moment. I'm just in this experience and feeling vulnerable. Like, what's that like for you?
It's it feels like a gush is the way I describe it. It just feels like heavy and like this huge release and relief to get to be vulnerable. But then also there's this balance between being just this regular messed up person like every other person and also being in the public eye. And it's like, so wanting to share vulnerability, but also not wanting to share too much. Like, do you find that? Like, I was on Instagram this morning talking about rejection, and there's little pieces that I'll share, but I don't really want to share everything with everybody. Same thing on the podcast, Finn, right? Like I'll share parts of myself, but sometimes I'm like, nah, man, that's mine. And so that is definitely a challenge that I think we need to talk about even more, like among ourselves, among people who are working in sexuality, whether it's in therapy or in tantra or in coaching or in sex work. Like there's pressure to perform, right? That you're supposed to be great at things. Like, how is it that I can teach about something, but then am I also supposed to be amazing at it myself all the time? Like, what if I'm not amazing today? What if I just want to be the dead fish?
Totally. Oh
and take it.
Or just like, oh, I didn't ask for what I wanted right now, and I'm in my head, and I'm quiet, and then I know that, you know, the mind can go, oh, but you know how to do da 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 da. But like the embodied practice of it is like a whole nother realm. So I do try to share that with people a lot. Like, this is why I do this work, because I need this work. You know, like that. Not like, oh, I have a lot of answers. I'm like, I'm working it out. I need help too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like I'm always talking on topics, but honestly, like I choose my topics because I struggle with them oftentimes, right? Like we just did a podcast last week on rejection, and I'm like, that is something that I need to personally work on. So I've got this therapist coming on, and I'm kind of getting a therapy session, and folks are listening and hopefully taking something out of it as well.
And if you had a porn site, you could do videos about the things that are like really like challenges. And this is Himeros.tv for me is like a playground for me to experiment with all the stuff that I'm still figuring out and struggling. So it's kind of, and it's why it's interesting to me. You were saying though that people,
an important medium.
It is.
Sorry,
you were saying that
so
there's
cool.
like a lot of expectations around you, and you know, I don't know much about straight men, and I try not to think about them too much, but like I imagine that like being a beautiful, successful doctor who specializes in sex and relationships, like when I think about how fragile masculinity is for a lot of men, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they would be like intimidated and like emasculated by like dating you. Or option B is that like thousands of men would be throwing themselves at you like all the time.
It's somewhere in the middle, but you have kind of summed up the two groups, like the ones who don't want anything to do with me because of the fragility, and that's fine. And then the ones who maybe see me as a conquest, right? Like I can do that, or I can show her something. Because people will always say that. They'll be like, oh, I could teach this, honey. And I'm like, yeah, you probably could. But you could. I'm not saying I'm not the best at it. I don't know everything. Like, I do study it, and I have been studying it for a long time. But I mean, listen, there's a lot of people who know, everybody knows super important stuff about sex that I will never know. Right. And that's why I really feel like my job is starting conversations. My job isn't like, here's a problem, I've got the answer. Like, here's an issue, I've got the pill. It's really, if I can get people thinking about things, if I can maybe share stories that I've heard or even some of my own, the goal is to keep the conversation going, right? Like even in a podcast, we can talk for half an hour or an hour and hopefully dig into a topic a little bit. But the goal is for someone to say, oh man, you know, when Davey said that really resonated with me. Here's why. Or to say, damn, when Jess said that sounds like some quackery. That doesn't make sense to me. And that's fine too, because if it doesn't fit for you, what's important is that you reflect upon that or you share that with a partner, right? Like I don't know how to fix, it's not that I know how to fix things. Now, when you work in the field, you see what things tend to work and what things don't. But the thing about humans and sexuality is that there's no two cases are ever the same.
Yeah, you get to try it on, see if it works for you. And if it does, awesome, run with it. And if not, try on something else. A lot of the videos that we film are with different tantric instructors or different sex coaches, and each one has like a totally different flavor. And so we kind of present this like sampler of different approaches, and people can pick and choose what works. And we've definitely uploaded videos where I've been like, okay, like that does not resonate with me, and then others where I'm like 100% spot on. So
I love it when there's a kind of a, like if with a client or a friend or whatever, I'm often trying to promote that, like, check in with yourself. And what does that feel like to you to reflect on that? Like, what are you, when you really feel in with your own sensibility about that or your own values, how does that line up? And to promote that, like, oh, actually I don't agree, or I totally do, but to really put it as a locus inside the self, instead of like, here's these answers out here that you should believe,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So for my answer to that question, a major challenge that I have faced sexually and how I handle it, I would say mine would be my tendency to date younger guys. I'm 38, and most of the guys that I have dated have been like in their younger 20s, like earlier 20s. And my way of handling it, I guess, has been that I just haven't been doing it lately. It's the older I get, Finn and I were just talking about this. Like, it used to be, it'd be like, oh, these guys are, like they're figuring themselves out, but we all are, but they're so damn cute. And now, like that, they're still figuring things out, and like where they are in life and where I am in my life, like, just to be honest, it makes them a little bit less cute. like there's not that like butt anymore. I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, no, that's just a lot of work, and I'm 38 and I'm tired. Like, I don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah, I think that's common when you become more like comfortable with who you are or comfortable in your life. You don't really want to do things that, I don't want to say you don't want challenge and you don't want growth, but you don't want things that feel laborious or draining.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying that all young people are laborious or draining, but you're in very different stages. So even if they are fabulous and really doing great for themselves, bridging that gap can be the thing that's laborious, right? It's not their fault. It's not your fault. It's just the whole dynamic can feel draining.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's just tired, like she needs her afternoon nap.
and I do think, like, a lot of gay men, it's interesting, and I'm not really sure, like, in general, I'm going to generalize a little bit, but in the heterosexual world, I'm not sure about age disparity in relationships as much as in queer land. It really is a thing. There's like this, like, permission to date across generations, and I see that quite a bit. And I think it can be really awesome sometimes if a man knows, like, what, like, defining the limits of that relationship. Like, what is it that I really want out of this particular connection versus, like, having some static idea of a relationship and what it's supposed to be like, and then trying to get someone maybe in their 20s to fit that, if they can't mirror back to you where you're at, in your 50s or 60s, or, in certain ways. So I think, yeah, just kind of feeling into what is it that I'm really enjoying about this connection, and how do I, like, really support that versus, like, you gotta be, like, I don't know, like, responsible and have all these different, because a lot of men in their 20s are still figuring themselves out, in ways that are, also are men in their 50s. But, yeah, certain phases, like Jess said, are really important.
And I think there's two things that I think of. One is, like, can the person with more power, because generally when you are older, there's going to be some more power in terms of, like, economic power, political power, social capital, whatever it may be. Can you recognize that privilege and look to attenuate it, right, and really acknowledge it, and think about how that shows up in the relationship and deal with that dynamic? And then in the hetero context, that it's highly gendered, right? Like, we do see it far more often with older men dating younger women, and less so the other way around. When we do see those relationships, the judgment tends to fall on women, right? Like, we talk about women being gold diggers, but we don't talk about what perhaps the older man is getting out of it, right? Why is one thing more superficial or more problematic than another? And then the flip side, when an older woman dates a younger man, I think oftentimes we look at it with judgment on her, right? Like, there is the sort of piece around, you go girl, cougar energy, but there still is this judgment, because there's just so much judgment around women to begin with, and around aging.
Yeah, and is it really so bad for someone to be interested in someone in part because of, like, the resources that they bring to the table? Because I often get people saying, sometimes younger guys will hook up with me because they, like, watched my YouTube channel, and people are like, aren't you concerned about that? I'm like, well, I might only be hooking up with them because I think they have a cute butt. So, like, are we going to like decide which of those is more shallow than the other? Like it's, if everyone leaves the transaction feeling satisfied and fulfilled and everyone's on the same page, like, isn't that really what matters?
Right. Why is there this hierarchy? But that hierarchy is probably rooted in like all of our sociocultural norms around patriarchy and around gender and around capitalism. Right?
Yeah.
So we have, that's a lot to unpack.
It is. Yeah. Well, speaking of YouTube channels, one of the things, Dr. Jess, that I love about you, I was watching your YouTube channel last night, and you have a podcast. Like, the conversations that you're having with people are not in like stuffy office buildings. You might be having those too, but like, I'm curious how you came to this realization that like this is how you wanted to approach the work that you do.
You know, I think it was an accident. So my backstory is that I was a high school teacher. I had students coming to me with all these issues that intersected with sexuality and other components of their identity. And so I decided to go back to do research to support teachers, because teachers are kind of thrown into the fire and told, hey, teach this subject that is probably going to piss the parents off, but is essential to their well-being. Sex ed literally saves lives, and we have data kind of across the spectrum on how sex ed can save lives. And so I went back and thought, oh, I'll like consult with the school board, or I'll get a job with the schools. And of course, they wanted nothing to do with me. They're like, sex, no, get out.
And that's in Canada.
I was, young. Exactly. And so then I moved into this space that's sort of edutainment, entertainment and education, and trying to take data or research and make it applicable to everyday use just by accident. Honestly, it was because no one would pay me to do anything else. So that's how I moved into this space. And honestly, you know, it's very fun. Like, I love what I'm doing. What I mostly do is speak, right? So I speak at retreats for primarily entrepreneurs and CEOs and their partners. So it's not corporate, but it's corporate adjacent, which is, you know, you'd think obviously corporations aren't talking about sex. Although maybe if they did, we would be better off and have safer environments, but that's also a different conversation. But I love it because these are folks who come in and really want growth, really want to do better. I'm not saying every single one of them, but most of them, like, they're there of their own volition. They don't have to be. They're not there because there's a deep-seated problem where they've come to the brink of crisis, which is when most people tend to call a therapist, and that oftentimes 5 or 6 years too late or later. They're there because they're like, hey, this is a thing that's worth investing in. I've got everything else going for me in life, but if I don't work on my relationship, what do I really have, right? Like, if you ask anybody what's the most important thing to you, they're always going to say like, oh, love and family, but then we don't act like that, right? We treat work as though it's more important. We prioritize it. So it's my job to kind of come in and give them an opportunity to reflect and have a different perspective. And I love it. Like, I have so much fun, but it's just an accident that I've kind of fallen into this work. And then the podcast, I have to be honest, somebody sort of made me start doing it. I have trouble saying no to people. So I started doing it with no intention of continuing it. And then I brought Brandon on board, my partner, to co-host. And then I just started loving it. I'm like, oh, we have these real conversations. Like, sometimes even when we're feeling tension, as we have been over the last, 18 months, because we've mostly just been together as opposed to my being on the road. Sometimes if we're feeling tense, the podcast can just release that tension because it's a real conversation, right? I'm not saying we're like 100% open and share. I'm not going to pretend. Like, I know there's always this talk of like people being authentic and vulnerable and letting people in. I'm like, I'm honest that I'm not going to freaking let you in on everything. But I do, like, we have real conversations. We don't prep, we don't rehearse, we don't have a script. And so sometimes I ask questions of Brandon and I learn something new. And that's pretty exciting after 20 years of living with someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's collaborative too. It's like this way of like engaging and like automatically bumping you into like a collaborative space where at home there might be like some sort of polarization or power thing going on,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
The edutainment, as you call it, I love that. I've never heard that before.
Oh, I knew you clocked that.
Yeah,
You were
I was like,
oh, I'm gonna start.
Yeah. I always say, my thing is, I always say it's dipping the broccoli in chocolate. You take like the nutritional thing at its core, and no one wants to eat broccoli, and then Finn does, but otherwise,
What?
no one else does. You dip it in chocolate, and then suddenly everyone wants to eat it, and that's like,
well, they at least want to lick it. I don't know if they want to eat it.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm smarter than that. I'm not biting through to the broccoli.
And that's what YouTube is. Like, that's what a lot of this is. Like, an effective video. You're past the sex toy challenge. Like, I'm assuming that you filmed that during the pandemic, and it's a collab video featuring a bunch of different people, like passing a sex toy virtually, different people in their different homes. And I'm assuming the intention behind that is like, okay, you're at home, but empowering people to still be connected to their pleasure, to their excitement. I mean, is that what?
Yeah, so I have to say that was Taylor's project, and I was just a part of it, but I definitely think that's a part of their message, right? And listen, like, I talk about stuff like blowjobs and going down. I'm like, am I super passionate about the techniques? No, honestly, like there's no one way to do it. But if I can talk about technique and weave in communication and weave in body confidence. Davey's like, I should teach that course.
I got it.
I should bring you, and you can redo it for me, because the real passion will come across. But my point is that, I might talk about something that's marketable and packaged well, but really I'm trying to get at these other conversations, right? Because yes, a blowjob, honestly, anybody can learn to give a blowjob. But how do you get to the point with, especially a long-term partner, where you're really in the mood for it, where you're feeling connected, where you've let go of the resentment, where you're excited by what could potentially be mundane. And so I'm trying to slip that broccoli in, coated in that blowjob chocolate, and hopefully they'll give it a lick. Some of them might be, I might trick them right into biting in. I don't know if you're into that part or just the licking and suck the chocolate off.
I love that you brought this up about blowjobs and like the technique thing. It's one of my pet peeves. Is like, I get asked that stuff, like, well, can you like give me like some techniques? I'm like, you know what? You just need to give it your all, like all your heart in this, what you're doing. You will find the techniques if you just like let your tongue be like an ambassador in your mouth for like your heart and like what you're feeling and what's going on inside of you, and you don't need techniques.
The techniques for me are a conduit to start these other conversations. Like what you're saying is, I always say, like, the key ingredient is enthusiasm. But how do you get enthusiastic? Well, there's almost no better way to get enthusiastic about something sexual than to be turned on yourself. So more important than like the Claudia or any of the other techniques we can teach is like what feels good for me. If I'm rubbing myself off on your leg, if I'm wearing a vibrator, if I'm thinking about whatever it is I'm thinking about and I'm turned on, that's when I'm going to give it, as you described, like my heart, my soul, all of that, because I'm enjoying it. So like there's all this stuff I think we can weave in kind of beneath the surface, because let's be honest, if we post a video about or an article with the headline like how to give your heart during sex, or like how to really, people maybe aren't going to click as much as the 7 hottest blowjob tips to blow their mind.
No,
and so it's not that we want to be clickbaity, but sometimes we have to, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, or as Davey says, the chocolate covered broccoli. My personal nightmare.
You got to get the foot in the door, and sometimes a little humor or sexuality or something like sexiness really gets it. What is this? What do you call it?
The tip in the mouth.
The clower tech? What do you call it? Something tech?
Claudia.
Claudia. Oh, it's just 2 hands, fingers interlaced, twice as much lube as you think you need, twice as much pressure. It's like you don't want to start with that, but to finish them off, Claudia, you know what? Everybody can just look it up. I think it's called Magic Touch by Claudia down in Puerto Morelos, Mexico, and she works with couples of all genders, and she does this whole. Actually, Finn, you might be interested in it. It's a full body experience. She's also like a Reiki healer and other. I don't know if it's Reiki. I can't remember, but she's quite spiritual in her approach. And of course, me. All I take out of it is the great move at the end, with the 2 hands and the fingers interlaced.
It looks like you're like pulling up a root vegetable or something. I'm like, does that feel good? Does that feel good?
If you use enough. The point that what I learned from Claudia was slow build up, really tune into the senses, cover the entire body, and then when you build to that, the penis can handle a lot more pressure, because a lot of people aren't using a lot of pressure when they give a blowjob or a hand job because they're not using enough slipperiness, like lubricant or whatever it is you use. So that's what I learned from her. It's pretty good.
When you have these conversations, do you see like a macro, like big difference between like these conversations with like gay men versus lesbians versus kind of like cis straight people? Like are there kind of trends among the different communities? 'Cause it seems like you work with everyone.
Yeah, and I'm like always assume queer until proven otherwise. So yeah, I would say one thing I noticed from cis straight women is that they're like really taking notes. Like they really want to learn the technique and be good and perform and please. And that sort of speaks to gendered expectations around who is serving whom, who is this for, right? Who's supposed to get the pleasure out of it? And there seems to be so much focus on the penis. And I think there's also pressure on cis women to be amazing in bed, right? They think if I learn this technique, then it'll get easier. From cis straight men, I get a lot of chest thumping, like, oh, I know this, like, I do all that. Like, I've literally, I've written some books on oral sex, and they'll come up to the table and they'll flip through the book just like they're fanning a flame, and they're like, do this, I do this, I do all of this, I'm like, you can't possibly, you have to read it to know what it is, but they're just like, I am the best in bed, you don't understand, Dr. Jess, and I'm like, and I never will, and I'm good with that. And then, so with the queer community, there's just, to me, there's more openness because we've been forced to talk about all these things, not about technique, but just been forced to talk about our sexuality and even acknowledge our own sexuality from a younger age on an ongoing basis. I do find that communication just more generally is more voluminous. So they're not sitting there like, oh, I must try this thing, I must do this thing. For me, I feel the same as you, Finn, that it's like, tune into what feels good. Like Claudia might feel good on a Tuesday, and it might feel like I'm plucking a root vegetable on Saturday. So getting in touch with your body, I think, is just so much more important. And I do think that ties into emotional literacy. And I don't want to say that queer folks are more literate around sex and feelings, but it often feels like we are because we're talking about it. Like, we're forced to. Right? Like, if I have to come out, I have to come out. I have to say, especially because I'm so straight passing, I've got this like male partner with the hockey butt. And so you're forced to confront it kind of all the time. And so I do think there are certainly differences. I don't know how if you see it similarly.
I was going to say there's a certain level of, I think, chest thumping among gay men too. And part of it is like, even in my opinion, even like, bad sex is still like pretty good. So like if all you've ever known your whole life is like bad sex, you're probably still kind of skating around thinking like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at it. But I had sex recently with a guy, and after we hooked up, and it wasn't great, like at all. And after we had sex, he was like, so what do you do? And I started telling him about my job, and he was like, oh, so like you must know a lot about sex. And like I could start to see like gears kind of turning in his head, and he was like, he like wanted me to evaluate him, and what he really wanted me to do was to validate him. Like he didn't want me to give him like C minuses, and I was supposed to be like, oh yeah, it was great. And I was like, actually, like I kept asking you to slow down because it actually doesn't feel good for the bottom to get like pounded all the time. And for some bottoms it does, like if that's what they want. And so I was communicating to you that didn't feel great, and you insisted on like going faster and faster and faster. And I get that that's maybe what you see in a lot of porn. And that might be your go-to, but like, turns out like that didn't really feel good for me. And he was really like, it was like I chopped him down at the knees. It was like he was like a hurt boy after our conversation.
That's so hard around sex. Like, no one wants to feel like we're not good at anything, but we're specifically sensitive about sex, right? Like if I make a meal, I always say, and I like overcook the pasta, or I burn the chicken, or whatever. I'm not like hanging my head in shame, never going to cook again, I hope nobody notices. It's like, well, next time I'll probably just cook the chicken for a shorter period of time, right? I'll probably set a timer for the pasta. So, it's not that, he went too fast. It sounds to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Davey, but it sounds like you're saying you didn't heed the feedback I was offering, right? It's not like there's a rule, like you must pump 0.8 seconds apart between thrusts. But if I say like, I'd like it more gentle, or I'd like it down here, or let's angle this way, and you're ignoring it, that to me is what makes sex bad. Right. Like it's not someone reading my mind and knowing exactly what I want. Because even I can't do that. Like, I can't describe what I want from sex tonight.
Right.
I have to.
I'm finding it out right now.
Yeah.
I mean, not right now.
Well, when I was younger, I would expect people to like read my mind and know how to please me with. And now at this point in my life, I tell people, but if in me expressing it, they still aren't listening to what I'm saying, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, like this isn't someone that I want to play with again. Like that's not an attentive lover. Not for me,
like what you said about it, the pasta versus like sex. To me, the way I think about it, because this is such an entry into how I think about the spiritual dimension around sexuality, because it is so vulnerable and the stakes are so high for so many people, because it's an immediate fast track right into like some of the deepest like childhood wounds and hopes for self. And it's just like this, like a trap door, like immediately going into like, where we formulated some of our initial ideas about who we think we are and what we're looking for out of, interactions with people. So it's so vulnerable. And I think for a lot of people, the chest thumping thing, as soon as I hear that, I'm just like, can you just please be vulnerable with me? Like, I don't want an expert, because I'm going to be real suspect about that. I just want to be with someone who can be okay with my awkwardness and my fear and my timidity, and
Actually, that's a big part of what I liked about that video, Just Skip the Kiss, was like, I liked that awkward buildup, because we don't always see that in both porn or romantic comedies or any popular cultural representations. It's just this kind of perfect coming together, can't wait to tear each other's clothes off. Like, I love that they were sitting on the porch and there's like the awkward cow sounds and the birds in the background, because it just felt more real to me.
That was a great segue. And
this is amazing.
Yeah. All right, so we'll run with that. The video is called Skip the Kiss, and it features Dylan Diaz and Adam Ramsey. It's directed by Matthew Lin. And in the video, as Dr. Jess mentioned, Dylan and Adam are on the front porch, reading between the lines. It seems like maybe they're living straight lives, like they're probably dads with wives and a family. And Adam just bought his parents' old house, and Dylan and him are reminiscing about being children and playing hide and seek. And he alludes to some hallway, and there's this noticeable kind of like awkwardness or discomfort that happens. Like there's this moment and like there's something there. And then Adam says that they should go check out the hallway again. And he goes in and Dylan follows him. And when Adam tries to kiss Dylan, he kind of was like, oh, like that's not going to happen, and pushes Dylan's head down, and they engage in some blowjobs and rimming. And at the end, Dylan does agree to a kiss on Adam's forehead. It's like a dad kiss. It's a little painful, but cute. And there's a lot to kind of break down in this, but just a personal story is, maybe this is oversharing, but when I was younger, I would do something kind of similar. I would mess around with my male friends, but we didn't have a hallway. But we had these games that we would play, and it was almost like the games were permission structures for us to do these things that like we wanted to do, but otherwise wouldn't do unless they were in this container. This is very embarrassing. So we would reenact scenes from like Disney movies. And so like one of us would play like the princess, I'd be like Jasmine, and he would be Aladdin. But because we were reenacting these like love scenes, it was okay. Like it wasn't gay, because we weren't ready to like deal with that. So I think for these guys, like the hallway or hide and seek was like their permission structure, and it's certainly okay as long as they don't kiss. Like there's these rules kind of involved. So yeah.
I thought you were, first of all, I love that, but I thought you were going to say you were like the teapot. I was just thinking about the singing teapot.
Probably was at one point.
From Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
And I love it too, because honestly, adults need games too. This parameters, the game parameters are so helpful to get out of the head and to create the container to play with something outside of your comfort zone. So I think that's a great way to think of it.
Yeah. I think about wrestling, like how common it is that wrestling... Yeah. So, and I don't mean just the sport. I mean, like, even when couples or like, teenagers, when they're just figuring things out, or like, this sounds so stupid, but I remember measuring hands with like my first like partner when we were really, really young, just as a way of like eventually holding hands and then lying together. And it was like, I think I used like, I have such big hands to like make that connection, because I couldn't say I want you to hold my hand or I hope you hold my hand.
That's really cute. Oh,
it's touching.
Yeah, it is. This idea too that like it's only gay if you kiss is not unique to this video. There's something that feels well, I'm a slut, But for me, there's something that feels very intimate about a kiss that like a blowjob, like it just feels good. And so like anyone can appreciate that. But a kiss, like it's pleasurable because you like the person that you're kissing with. I don't know if that makes does that make any sense?
Yeah. Super intimate. I actually didn't kiss Brandon when we hooked up at first. I like avoided it because it was just going to be sex. And I remember like he tried to kiss me and I was like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Same here. Yeah. Anytime I used to like feel, and not everybody feels this way. Sometimes it's like they would, it's different, but I would so much rather have sex with someone that I was attracted to and just wait on the kiss, because I'm like, I don't know if I feel that way. It really activates a lot of feelings. And when someone would try to kiss me, I would have like a real strong kind of like, hey, no, stop,
Okay. Well, here's a game on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like the most intimate. Okay, I'm going to list a couple sex acts, and we each get to say how intimate it feels to us. So, so being fucked by someone on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being super intimate.
just any someone.
Yeah.
Just the act itself, like you're going to like really decouple the act from like maybe from my boyfriend versus like a.
Because for me, it's like a what do you say it was?
5.
5.
Yeah, for me, 6 or 7 maybe.
Oh wow, I'm like a 1. Like that's to me, that's like the least intimate thing is to because I don't even have to do anything. Like I'm just I'm getting fucked. Okay, next one is sucking someone's dick.
It's like a handshake.
Is that a 1 for you, Finn?
Yeah. 0.5. Love it.
I need context because I think I have to like, there's something I have to really like about you, but I don't find the act itself intimate.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I find it more intimate because I'm like in their like loins. Like I'm like, I can smell them. Like it's like, so maybe that's like a 3 for me.
It's a place where I can get really selfish. Like I feel really selfish with blowjobs. It's not for me often. Sometimes it is about giving pleasure, but often it's about taking. For me, it's like I'm going to take that.
Okay. What about topping or pegging someone?
I feel nothing. 1.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that you don't have to like intimately communicate, but I don't.
This is so interesting. Yeah, I would say it's like a 6 or a 7 for me because I have to like enter their butt. Like I'm gonna see their butthole. Yeah. Like that's intimate.
For you, it's all about the terrain. Like how close do I get to?
I'd say like a 4. Like yeah.
Okay. How about licking someone's feet?
Oh, I think that's pretty intimate for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 or 9, 10.
Yeah.
Okay, kissing someone.
6.
Like a 7.
Yeah, I'm about an 8. Now, last one is holding someone's hand.
That's
like
high
an
up for
intimacy.
me.
Yeah,
Is it?
totally. This is a 10 for
Sorry.
me, holding someone's hand. Yeah.
Is
That's
it?
like I
I'll
love you.
friends' hands. Yeah, like I'll hold a hand like in a way that's just like we're buddies, and I have a really good friend that I do that with all the time.
Really?
Yeah. So I'd say maybe like maybe 3. There's a kind of intimacy there, but not like whoa, this is hitting my romantic kind of ideals or anything. Yeah.
Dr. Jess, what is it for you?
I think it's pretty high, like a 7, 8. Like,
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say because I feel like I'm basing it on experience as opposed to, like I don't hold hands with anyone except Brandon. Like I wouldn't hold a friend's hand, especially not during COVID. I'm not touching anybody. Sneezing on someone, 10.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Coughing
telling a story within 6 feet.
Taking your mask off. Someone.
11. Oh, I assumed we had masks on for all of these, especially the blowjob.
Right. It's just through a glory hole.
I'm just rubbing up against it.
Yeah. Well, they have those fabulous masks that are just like a mouth hole with like it's like a sock hood, you know.
Yeah.
I love
They
those.
have them for straws, but probably not. That's not penis size.
Well, it's a glory hole. That's what you would just need. Because, well, I guess you could wear the glory hole if you want, but you could.
I think that's called like a ring to like hold your mouth, you know.
I like the visual that's happening.
I do too. I know. That's actually what I have to say. When I took a class, how I met Dr. Jessica was I took a class at Modern Sex Therapy Institute, and it was a thing like addressing common sexual concerns. And I was just floored with the ease with which you would use language and like normalize, like using the common vernacular. And I love that because I think, I'm going to generalize now, but I work with gay men so much. And for a lot of gay men, if you're talking like penis or using words that are like more clinical, I see it like a wall go up. It's like when I say cock and balls and suck and fuck and all that, and they're just like, yeah, tell me more. And they kind of like the language really enrolls them. So when I heard you just effortlessly like wielding these words and like talking about things in a real straightforward and dynamic way, I was like, that is so cool how much she's modeling a permission to say what feels, what feels true. And
I wonder if for folks who have been like pathologized by the system and othered by the system and judged by the system and kind of let down by clinicians, if there's like this clear separation between like how a doctor speaks to me, a doctor who didn't support me, who didn't ask the right questions, who ignored my concerns as a gay man, who ignored my sexuality or denied it or, you know, or degraded it or whatever it may be. If there's like, is there like a reclaiming? Is there like, no, one is about pleasure and who I am and my identity, and the other is about a system that creates a pathology around me.
Mm-hmm.
It's also,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the rebel in me too. It's like, you know, sexuality and being rebellious were conflated as really early on for me. So it's almost like, don't sound like my dad when you talk about this.
But also it's like it's meeting people where they're at, because like you're primed to hear like cock and balls and all that. But like I promise you, if my mom would go like running for the hills, and my mom would totally need to learn about sex and sexuality, but like you would have to use her language, which would be like your no danger zone. That would be
Oh no.
your bathing suit area.
Oh no. Right, and that's what we're like. That's what we're trying to undo here.
I know.
Right? It's just like normalize these conversations to take it out of there's so much shame, right? If you're still speaking that way.
Okay, so speaking of this skip the kiss, I do have a little anecdote, a little story. I have a lot of sex stories today to share, but years ago, I was like a teenager. I hooked up with this guy. He was this really like masculine jock, like presented himself as very straight. And I've shared kind of the detailed version of the story, I'm sure, at some point in this podcast. But at one point during the hookup, where I wasn't even sure if he was really like, his pants had come down and I wasn't really like totally sure if he was on board with it. And I started blowing him, and he grabbed me by the back of the neck and like lifted me up. And I was like, okay, he's either going to like, this is either going to be really bad or really good. And like, he could punch me in the face right now. Like, I don't know what's about to happen. And he started kissing me. And it was hot, but if I'm 100% honest, I was a little bit turned off by it because I didn't want him to like it that much. Like, I want him to like it, but like, I didn't want that he was this like straight guy and like not like that. To me, that was part of, it was this like toxic straight boy fantasy. That's not healthy, is it?
Therapy
like,
session.
That's not healthy, right?
You just opened a whole therapy session.
Like getting off on the fact that the guy is like straight and not really that into it. Like, why would that make it any better? That's so fucked up.
Something about intimacy?
No, it just means I hate myself,
For you?
probably. Yeah. Dr. Jess,
No, it doesn't necessarily mean you hate yourself. Go easy on yourself.
It's a big jump. It's a real big jump. Yeah, it's an interesting place to explore, though, to me, like around like intimacy and the meanings, because it's different maybe for everybody, but like what you associate with all of those different aspects and why you wanted the emotional distance, maybe.
Yeah. Like you see those porns, right? Where like the guy's just like totally checked out. He's like watching porn or something, and like someone's blowing him. Like, I can recognize that it's also like totally horrible sex, but also there's something about it that's really, really hot to me. So
Actually, me too.
Off to that. Yeah.
That being ignored. I always like talk about well, I think we might have talked about this when in that class you're talking about, Finn, but like elevated erotic feelings. So your core erotic feeling often being related to like safety. And so when those core feelings are already fulfilled, like if you already feel safe, if you already feel loved, if you already feel honored, if you already feel respected, that subversion of less desirable feelings like being ignored, being degraded, can be really exciting, right? Like I think sex is this great opportunity to take emotions that are generally regarded as negative and turn it into something hot and exciting. So I think it doesn't mean you're twisted.
I was going to say, do you hate yourself too, Dr. Jess?
You know what it is for me? Like within the context of my marriage, I feel like so loved and honored, and I appreciate that. And honestly, like, man, I have a good life and no complaints there. And at the same time, like that's going to be boring unless I can play with risk. Like I need a lot of risk. I get bored very easily. And so if I don't live on the edge in some emotional way like that, it's just not as exciting for me. I'm not saying that loving, romantic, connected sex doesn't feel good, but at times I want risk. Like it's the reason I live my life the way I do, the reason I like travel all the time and work all over the place and probably work in this industry that makes me a bit of a social pariah in some respects. So I need that degree of risk. Or not I need, I like. So I don't know that it's about hating yourself.
Okay.
No, and I love what you're bringing up about the relationship piece. I feel like so many relationships, like mine included, are really kind of thrive on like a lot of times protecting me from some of those vulnerabilities and pains that I have. But like the erotic templates are built upon those vulnerabilities and wounds, and so it's like, oh, I can't feel safe and risky in this moment at the same time. So I have to kind of like go towards one or the other and like learn to cultivate that tension. So these feelings about like being ignored, yeah, it's like, oh, this might have hurt when I was a little kid, but now I get to have control of this dynamic and I'm going to be ignored in high style. And it's, it's going to have like an excitement to it where when we didn't have control, there wasn't excitement.
Yeah, like I'm going to invite this super hot guy over to like totally ignore me. And yeah. Dr. Jess, do you watch porn?
Oh yeah.
And what kind of porn do you have like certain porn that you kind of like seek out?
Is this going to be so lazy, like whatever's on the first page usually?
Really? Yeah.
Marketing tip.
Yeah.
What do I seek out? So I prefer stuff that is women. Just women, usually. I don't mind if men are there sometimes. The same way I feel about sex.
Yeah, but like, so is this like on mainstream like tube sites that you're going to?
No, so some pay sites. I don't know if you like if I should mention them, but like a lot of stuff that is seen as like ethical porn, Balesa Plus, some of that stuff. Afterglow. I don't know if you know Afterglow. They're a startup. Yeah, so not so much the tubes. The tube sites there's too much stuff there for me. It's a lot of it's, of course not bought. It's just stolen, ripped there. So yeah, and I'm not super picky. Like sometimes I come across it by accident. I know that sounds so made up. But
I was gonna say, wait, hold on.
I don't feel like I'm always particularly purposeful about what I'm watching. I am purposeful about the sites that I'm going to, yes, but I'm not super picky. Like I also really like the cam sites, right? I really like this kind of like awkward, don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they're cutting their toenails. Maybe they're going to put that up their vagina. Like I like that kind of, I like that raw. Yeah. Like, and I the only thing with the tube sites is like, I will go into a hole. Like I don't want to stop, not tube sites, sorry, cam sites.
Yeah.
Is that I'm like, I don't want to stop watching. What are they going to do next? This is really interesting to me. And it is a matter of convenience for me there. Like
is the voyeurism kind of, is that like, is it a voyeurism to like being kind of watching like this private world of somebody? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I recommend it to clients all the time to just like take a look, see what's going on. Like, especially people who are in monogamous relationships who are looking to learn more, explore more, expand. I think it's I'm not saying to people, hey, if you're in a monogamous relationship, go immediately on the campsites tonight. I think it's a conversation you're probably going to have, but I think it's an important conversation.
years ago, I filmed a YouTube video of real lesbians reacting to like mainstream lesbian porn, and it was so funny because they were just immediately clocking it, like, oh, she's faking it. Like, there was a moment in the video where like one of the models like she was like licking a stiletto heel and then like inserting it in her vagina, and she was like, okay, she's like, no lesbian has ever done this. Like this is for men. Like this is
this is a man that made this for sure, and a specific kind of man.
And the director was like, now lick the stiletto. And she was like, really?
Oh god, yeah, like, so hot.
Oh my god,
it's like, I hate it.
There are so many things in my house that could go in there, and I have a lot of stilettos, and it's none of those.
Well,
they're for walking and stabbing, and that is it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's really sitting and stabbing. You just walk someplace for 2 seconds and sit down.
And crossing the leg, the geometry of the leg crossed with the stiletto.
Yeah.
It's such an iconic little flash of beauty. I love that.
Well, we are coming up on the top of the hour. This has been really fun. Dr. Jess, it was so fun having you here. I love these conversations. I love everything you contributed. Thank you for being here. If people want to find more about your work, what you do, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, and your book.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, the Sex with Dr. Jess podcast is in all platforms, and sexwithdrjess.com.
Awesome. And Finn, where can people get more of you?
FinnDeerhart.com, FINNDEERHART.com.
Awesome. And join us next week where we'll be discussing another Himeros.tv video. And remember, you can join Himeros.tv and save 20% off at Himeros.tv/pod. Thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, more to come.